what Smith Wigglesworth might ask you in heaven. I've had the pleasure of reading so many of the sermons and studying the lives of our favorite faith filled men and women of God. It's been my pleasure to share and discuss them and their lives and their inspiring message with so many of you. In these discussions, one thing that comes up quite often is a perceived distance between these people and ourselves. From what we hear about them experiencing and what we experience in our lives and in our churches. I often hear, "Where are the Smith Wigglesworths of today?" Or, "We need someone like John G. Lake in our day." Now, of course, I would love to have seen Smith or John or Mariah, and I look forward to meeting them someday in glory and thanking them for their bold faith and asking them a question or two. Won't you? But here's something you may not have thought about. What are they going to ask you? I think we can get in the habit of looking back, walking through church history like a museum exhibit, but we forget something that Catholic and Orthodox churches thrive on, which is the succession and connection to the past. They view themselves as an unbroken line going back to the Bible times, but of course, not necessarily a connection to the Book of Acts Christianity. Though, in their defense, their line started a few hundred years late, and the supernatural Christian lifestyle is as foreign to them as a Baptist fire tunnel, and is more normal for most of them to want to lay their hands on a dead saint's thigh bone than lay hands on the sick for healing. It could be argued that they look to the past, which is a good thing, with such fervor that they forgot the natural progression that's an integral part of being human and truly being spiritual. Revolutionaries and reformers look forward. By design, they look back and they look at the present and see that where they were, where the church was, and where the general understanding just didn't satisfy. They were aware of a need right then, and what drove them was elevating the present to the place that it should be, and giving everyone else a future that didn't lack like the past did. When we look at these amazing generals of the faith, we have to see them in this light. And we may have to be ready with an answer, like Peter said, about our faith. And perhaps in the same way to be ready to have an answer for Smith Wigglesworth or John G. Lake if they ask us something like, "How did my messages affect you?" Or, "Where's the church now, 100 years after God gave me my ministry for the benefit of the church?" Or, "How did the church, and most importantly, how did you take the ball and run with it?" We see this Reformation spirit with many ministers today. And one thing I've noticed about the ones that are breaking new ground in love and power is that effectiveness is an important part of their drive. They want to hear testimonies, not to prop themselves up, as all glory is given to God, but they really want to hear the positive impact of the message and the results of the ministry. Their life pursuits, their revelation, the spirit within them spurring them on into kingdom demonstration and kingdom results. And they're all only realized in the effectiveness of the message. And the result is the fruit. I grew up in a suburban Pentecostal church in the northern US that would express belief in the Holy Spirit manifestations, but there wasn't a system, theological or cultural, that would open a way for pursuit of the gifts of the Spirit. From a young age, I read books by early Pentecostal pioneers who developed the theology of the Spirit, pneumatology, and what started as experience at Pentecost, or in the early Pentecostal movement, had become a systematically defined doctrine of the Spirit. You would think that deeper understanding of something would result in a deeper experience externally. But what we see is, both in the centuries after Pentecost in Acts 2 and in the decades after the Azusa Street revival and Pentecostal movement, that very often, for some things, when knowledge increases, experience can tend to decrease. But God's design throughout Scripture is that we have a correct understanding and a pursuit of truth, which is expected to be accompanied by an experience of God and realizing His promises in the natural. The preaching of the gospel was to be so focused on experience that Jesus told the disciples to wait until they received the ability to demonstrate, so they wouldn't be tempted to just bloviate. During my personal revival at age 30, God supernaturally directed me to different ministers and ministries for my personal training for my unique spiritual destiny, which we all have, by the way, if you will join Him on that journey. One ministry I was led to was John G. Lake Ministries, led by Curry Blake, whose drive and passion for understanding and experience inspired me in innumerable ways. Upon meeting him once years back, I thanked him for his drive and work and passion, and he graciously responded and then asked me a question. Is it working for you? How often do we hear that when we talk about the gospel? How often do we ask as we read the Psalms, is this working for me? Sadly, it seems that those who do ask that question have incomplete understanding and then answer something like, no, it isn't. These are the ones who then turn to the things that can't ever bring real peace and deep joy and live a fraction of the life possible. And many become enemies or critics of the very gift they rejected because of the lack of understanding and experience. Conversely, there's a large portion of Christians who can answer a resounding yes to that question about the gospel and kingdom life. And it fuels them and drives them, and the ultimate journey that one could be on is definitely working for them. And I answered Reverend Blake in response to his question with a confident yes as well, as the things he studied and learned from our favorite faith heroes were processed and seen through a lens that stripped many of the sacred cows that had developed in the church since Wigglesworth and Lake. And in doing so was able to develop teachings that spiritually spit out the bones so we could be nourished by the real meat of the word. The real meat satisfies. It satisfies the information that the stomach requires, and it gives you energy. And real spiritual understanding will do the same. This is a very real way that faith results in works. The more you know, the more you go. Faith, which can be seen as trust and confidence in what we understand about God, is usually discussed by those who connect faith with an idea instead of connecting it with supernatural action. Centuries of doctrine created by those whose Christianity lacks supernatural experience have turned the normal expectations of the first century spirit filled life into something where faith resulting in works is about being nice or not doing bad. It's easy to see how an expectation of faith that relies on your performance would result in so much dissatisfaction. But if this faith, with its understanding and the expectation that accompanies it, brings good things and gains notoriety for good reasons, then that's the sort of news that is welcome. It's the news that works. The gospel works. The closer our understanding and expectation is to the truth of the gospel. And if there's a truth, a revelation, some new thing that God is building us up with that can only be learned progressively, then it will work. Things will change. They have to. And where it doesn't work, then either understanding or expectation may need an adjustment. It is this adjustment that the reformers saw. This adjustment to understanding and expectation is what made Wigglesworth proudly preach faith and demonstrate it boldly as none other. This pursuit of accurate truth, along with the experience of the God of truth, led Maria Woodworth-Etter through a life that should have made her sit down. But instead, she stood boldly and with faith for God, and sometimes for hours on end in a trance. John G. Lake took this faith with expectation to such levels that his audience would experience healing while he simply taught. And then he developed training centers to teach others to inspire the same faith in others. They looked forward to our day with the expectation that as they saw lack and filled it, that we would do the same. They saw weakness and gave their life to replace it by their strength and faith in God, and it was accompanied by the hope that the same passion and experience would multiply and grow. And as interested as we might be in asking Wigglesworth about kicking the lifeless baby to whom God restored life, we have to know that Wigglesworth himself would be more interested in asking you, after hearing his sermons and legends, did it work for you? How has your life changed for the better, having heard them? What did you do for the Lord that you wouldn't have if you didn't have your faith and expectations heightened by these wonderful testimonies of the faithful? What if he asked, is your world in the 21st century better off based on what we did in the 20th century? I tell you, these mighty reformers of the faith, the righteous revolutionaries, that's what they'll want to know. What they gave their lives for and endured for the faith was indistinguishable from their own individual persona. And I think they carried that same faith and love into eternity with them. Though we might be thinking, I can't wait to ask them about this story I heard. I think that we will find their passion and pursuit of the experiential gospel hasn't lessened, but rather increased in the presence of Christ. And I think that they would, with joy and tears, when recognized in heaven, ask you a question that you might not have thought they would ask. I understand our original questions and the online comments that I read as we mourn the absence of and express our desire for the Wigglesworths and the Lakes of today. But what if that just provides us with the same lack that inspired them to fill that lack? What if the cycle continues today and in your life, in your church, in your world, you do the same things that they did and that was done by all the reformers and righteous revolutionaries before them? What if the question burns within you because of a divine call to see where understanding and experience lack today, so that you can experience what Wigglesworth did, not from the audience, but from the stage or in the home or on the street? When you read the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, I think many of us would love to have been in that audience. Wouldn't it have been fantastic to hear Christ's message and then receive of the food he multiplied? Now let's go one step better. What if we were one of the disciples who got to hear that and every message Jesus gave? And then we were able to distribute the miraculously provided food and have plenty ourselves as well. Those are positions we're in when we ask for the Lakes and Wigglesworths of today. We want to be in the crowd and receive. But what if there's one step better than that? What if the drive and desire within you is not just so that you could eat or distribute, but it's a sign burning within your spirit that you yourself are called to be one that feeds? What if you're called to stand in the place of Christ, empowered by Him, allowing Him everything so that you can be an even better reflection of Him than Lake was, or Wigglesworth in his day, or Amy or Catherine in theirs? And it will be because we were soldiers who stood upon the shoulders of these generals who have gone before us. And we realize that instead of wanting to see their day, we see that they were looking to ours with an expectation that we wouldn't just have questions for them, but that we would have answers. Instead of our asking for their testimonies, we can understand that they are looking forward to hearing ours. It might not be any easier for us than it was for them. And even if not, we're blessed that we're farther along because of them, and honored that the Lord put them in our path to blaze the same trail that we now clear for ourselves and clear for the generations to come. So, as you consider the questions you'll have for these wonderful men and women of God when you step into eternity, be ready with an answer for a question that you might get in return as you discuss the wonderful works of God on the earth. And if you don't think you have as many testimonies as you want to have, well, now is the perfect time to get some. And when you ask, where are the Wigglesworths and Lakes and Etters of today? Let's follow it up with a prayer. Here am I, Lord. Send me.